The millionaire who married the contract bride to save his empire, then begged for a second chance the night New York froze under its first winter storm. Ethan Royce stood inside the highest office of Royce Empire, staring down at the city as if he owned every breath it exhaled. His world gleamed, polished marble, glass walls, and a legacy too heavy for any man to carry alone. Yet behind all that perfection, a single signature on a contract had just rewritten his fate. Across town, in a dim studio lit only by a desk lamp, Lena Hayes brushed graphite across paper with trembling fingers. Her sketchbook lay open like a diary she could never speak aloud. She believed she was drawing a future she could still save, unaware that by morning, that same future would belong to a man she had never truly met. Two lives, two storms, moving toward each other without warning. And when they finally collided, it would not be love at first sight. It would be survival. But tonight, neither of them knew what was coming, or how one contract would cost both of them far more than they ever intended. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love knowing where our audience is tuning in from. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Ethan Royce was the kind of man whose name could silence an entire room. At only 32, he had inherited the crown of Royce Empire, a fashion dynasty that ruled the American luxury market. To the world, he was the definition of success, brilliant, untouchable, and impossibly composed. Yet behind that polished exterior, there was a man running from something deeper than deadlines or numbers, a man running from his own heart. Across the city, under the pale glow of New York's winter light, a woman named Lena Hayes sketched quietly by her studio window. Her fingers were ink-stained, her coffee long gone cold, but her eyes still carried that gentle fire of someone who believed in beauty more than fame. She had no idea that the next line she would draw would lead her straight into the heart of the man who would shatter her world. Years earlier, Lena and Ava Bennett had been inseparable, two dreamers at design school, sharing thrift store meals and sleepless nights, promising to one day change the world of fashion together. But ambition does strange things to people. While Lena built her father's small company with love and patience, Ava learned how to climb. And the higher she climbed, the smaller their friendship became. When Royce Empire released a breathtaking new collection, critics called Ava a genius. The designs carried Lena's quiet handwriting, her curves, her patterns, her soul, stolen and renamed. Within weeks, Hayes Atelier was labeled a copycat brand. Orders disappeared, clients left, and investors pulled out. Lena's father suffered a heart attack from the shock. Desperate to save the family company, Lena accepted a deal she barely understood, a marriage contract with Ethan Royce, the powerful CEO whose empire could save her own. It was supposed to be business, nothing more. 1 year of appearances, 1 year of pretending, 1 year to restore her father's legacy. Ethan did not believe in love. He believed in structure, in numbers, in signatures. When Lena signed that contract, he saw her as another calculated decision, a name that would look good beside his in newspapers, a partnership that would silence rumors about his personal life. But the moment she stepped into his world, something began to shift. The quiet strength in her eyes unsettled him. The way she stood tall even as gossip swirled around her made him feel something he could not explain. The media called her the lucky bride. His board called her the perfect cover. Ethan called her Mrs. Royce, coldly, formally, as if the name itself were part of the contract. Lena told herself she would endure it. For her father, for the company, for the years of hard work that Ava had stolen. She moved into the marble penthouse above Fifth Avenue, into a life that did not belong to her. Every morning she woke beside a man she did not know, and every night she heard him on the phone discussing profits, mergers, and market expansion as if their marriage were a business plan. Still, there were moments that cracked the surface, moments when his hand brushed hers while passing coffee, when he looked at her longer than he should have during a meeting, when silence between them felt heavier than words. In the world of fashion, appearances are everything. And for a while, their arrangement worked. Lena's family company was revived under the Royce brand. The press adored them. Magazines called them the power couple of New York. But Ava was still there, watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. And as the next fashion season approached, Ava would set in motion a betrayal so cruel that it would not only destroy Lena's name, but also break the heart of the millionaire who thought he could never fall in love. Because sometimes, the contract you sign with logic ends up being rewritten by fate. The day Lena walked into Royce Empire, the world seemed too big for her small heartbeat. The glass walls reflected her image 1,000 times, and each reflection looked like a stranger trying to look brave. Ethan Royce's office stood at the top floor, polished, minimal, and cold, just like the man himself. He greeted her with a nod, not a smile. His tone was formal, precise, and distant. "This arrangement will remain professional," he said. "You will attend the public events, manage the creative division's new collection, and maintain discretion at all times. I do not tolerate scandals, Mrs. Royce." Mrs. Royce. The words hit harder than she expected. They were supposed to sound safe, but instead they sounded like a wall closing in. Lena signed the papers, her name curling beside his on the final line. And just like that, her life became a transaction. The first weeks of their contract marriage moved like a blur of cameras, meetings, and headlines. They attended charity galas hand in hand, smiled for photographers, and went home to a silence so heavy it felt alive. Ethan treated her with polite distance, always careful to maintain the illusion of perfection in public. At first, Lena convinced herself she did not care. The contract would last 12 months, long enough to restore her father's company and short enough to survive without feeling. But feelings do not follow contracts. Each morning, she saw Ethan in the breakfast room, reading business reports under the warm morning light. He was precise, disciplined, and unreachable. Yet once, she saw him pause, staring out at the skyline as if the city reminded him of something he could never have. For a second, he looked human. Then he looked away. At the office, the situation was harder. Ava Bennett was there, sitting confidently at the head of the design floor. She looked up with a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. "Welcome to Royce Empire, Mrs. Royce," Ava said sweetly. "I hope you do not plan to redesign what already works." Lena felt her throat tighten. Every designer in the room knew the history between them, but no one dared to speak it aloud. Ava's tone was sugar-coated venom, enough to make Lena understand that this company was not just Ethan's world. It was Ava's battlefield. Days turned into weeks. Lena worked quietly, avoiding confrontation, sketching new ideas for the fall collection. She poured her pain into fabric and form, creating designs that spoke of resilience and rebirth. But every time she submitted her drafts, Ava found a way to undermine them, claiming Lena's ideas lacked market vision, or that her aesthetic was too sentimental for the brand. Ethan, buried in board meetings, barely noticed the tension growing between the two women. He trusted Ava's experience and dismissed Lena's quiet protests as emotional overreaction. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. Then came the first betrayal. 2 months before the fashion showcase, Ava released a new teaser collection under the Royce Empire brand. To the public, it was a triumph. But to Lena, it was a nightmare. Every piece mirrored her own designs, sketches she had stored privately in her office. Her signature silhouettes, her unique embroidery, her color palettes, all stolen. When Lena confronted Ethan, he did not look up from his papers. "You are accusing my creative director without evidence," he said coldly. "Do not embarrass yourself, or this company, with unfounded drama." The words shattered her. She left his office in silence, her tears held back until the elevator doors closed. Ava had won again, and this time, Lena's reputation was the cost. Within days, whispers spread across the company. The CEO's wife is stealing ideas from her boss. Gossip traveled faster than truth. Employees looked away when she entered the room. The press began to speculate. Royce's new bride. Or copycat designer, one headline read. Ethan remained distant, focused on damage control. The contract had made them partners in appearance, but strangers in reality. The world saw them as the perfect couple, yet behind the walls of their penthouse, silence became their only conversation. One night, Lena found Ethan in his study, still in his suit, staring at the city lights. She wanted to tell him everything, How Ava manipulated her. How her designs were stolen. How much it hurt to be doubted by the man she had begun to care for. But when he turned to her, his eyes were tired, guarded, unreadable. "Go to sleep, Lena," he said softly, but not kindly. She nodded, walked away, and realized for the first time that she was not fighting for her marriage anymore. She was fighting for herself. And somewhere deep inside that fight, something in her heart began to change. A seed of love she never meant to plant, quietly growing in the soil of betrayal. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension and silence. Royce Empire prepared for its biggest event of the year, the Fall Fashion Showcase in Manhattan. For most of New York, it was a night of celebration and glamour. For Lena, it was a countdown to humiliation. Ava controlled every aspect of the project. She approved fabrics, edited sketches, and charmed the board of directors with her effortless poise. Lena's ideas were dismissed one by one, her contributions buried under corporate politeness. Yet what hurt most was Ethan's indifference. He attended meetings, gave orders, and never once looked at her as if she was more than a name on the company payroll or a line in his contract. Late one evening, Lena stayed in her office long after everyone had left. The city lights glimmered through the glass walls, turning her reflection into a ghost. She flipped through her sketchbook, the one she had hidden away like a diary. The designs were raw, emotional, born from heartbreak and hope. She stared at the last page, a dress made of layered silk and fragile lace, shaped like a shattered heart stitched back together. It was her masterpiece. The next morning, that design was gone. Her desk drawers had been emptied. The files in her computer had been erased. Panic flooded through her as she searched every corner, her breath quickening with each second. Then, an email from the company newsletter arrived in her inbox. Breaking news. Royce Empire unveils a breathtaking new centerpiece for the fall showcase. The image on the screen froze her heart. It was her dress. The same cut, the same details, even the uneven stitching she had designed to represent imperfection. But the credit line beneath it read, Creative Director Ava Bennett. Lena's vision blurred. Her hands trembled. For a moment, she thought it must be a mistake. Then reality crashed in like cold water. Ava had done it again. When Lena confronted her in the design studio, Ava smiled with practiced calm. "You really should lock your computer," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "In this business, ideas move fast. Maybe too fast for you." Lena wanted to scream, but the room was filled with assistants and interns, all pretending not to listen. She could feel the humiliation burning under her skin, but she refused to give Ava the satisfaction of tears. She stormed to Ethan's office, clutching her sketchbook, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely breathe. "She stole my work, Ethan," she said. "The final piece of the showcase, it is mine. I have proof." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Lena, do you realize what you are accusing her of?" "I am accusing her of stealing." He sighed, closing the folder in front of him. "Ava has been with this company for years. She is the face of our creative division. You are my wife, which already complicates the situation. Do not make it worse by creating unnecessary drama." The words hit her harder than any slap. "Unnecessary drama," she whispered. "My entire life's work is being stolen, and you call it drama?" Ethan's voice turned colder. "You have no proof. And if you go public with this, you will damage the company's reputation and mine. I expect you to handle this quietly." That was the moment something inside her broke. She walked out of his office without another word, her heels echoing through the marble hallway. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper. When the elevator doors closed, she let out a sob she had been holding for months. By the time the showcase arrived, the storm had already begun. The press flooded the event. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and Ava basked in the spotlight, radiant in her stolen glory. Lena stood in the background, her expression calm but her heart bleeding. As the models walked down the runway wearing her creations, she felt invisible, erased by the very people she had trusted. Ethan stood beside Ava, applauding, shaking hands with investors, unaware that his empire was built on betrayal. When the final model stepped out wearing the stolen centerpiece dress, the crowd gasped and rose to their feet. The applause was thunderous. The cameras focused on Ava. Lena turned away. In that moment, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not cry in front of them. Not Ethan. Not Ava. Not the world. She walked out of the hall, her face expressionless, her heart hollow. Outside, the cold air of New York cut through her like glass. She looked up at the skyscrapers towering above her, symbols of power, of wealth, of men like Ethan who thought love could be signed, dated, and terminated like a contract. That night, she packed her things and left the penthouse without a word. The contract was over, and so was the part of her that believed in him. The night Lena left the Royce penthouse, the city was quiet, too quiet for a place that never slept. Her suitcase was small, her eyes red, and her hands trembling from exhaustion. She had nothing left to say. The woman who had walked into Ethan Royce's world as a contract bride was not the same woman walking away now. For the first time in months, she felt free. Free from the marble walls, free from his cold eyes, free from a marriage built on signatures instead of love. But freedom had a price. The tabloids moved fast. Within 24 hours, headlines appeared across every digital screen. Royce Empire designer leaves amid plagiarism allegations. The media twisted the story, painting her as the villain who had tried to sabotage Ava Bennett and destroy the company's reputation. Ethan did not defend her. At first, he ignored the news, assuming it would fade. But Ava made sure it did not. She leaked more statements, more evidence, until the public believed that Lena had stolen designs from Royce Empire. The company's investors grew nervous. Stockholders demanded answers. Ethan, cornered by public pressure, distanced himself completely. "We are handling the matter." Internally, he told reporters, standing at the podium in his perfectly tailored navy suit. Royce Empire has always upheld originality and integrity. The world applauded him for his composure. Lena watched that same press conference from a small apartment she had rented in Brooklyn, her heart breaking all over again. The man she had once defended, the man she had begun to love, was now protecting the woman who had destroyed her. Days passed in silence. Her phone stopped ringing. Her email was flooded with canceled contracts. No one in the fashion world wanted to work with the woman who copied. She could barely step outside without feeling the sting of whispers following her down the street. Then, the collapse began, not hers, but his. It started with small rumors, clients demanding refunds, brands withdrawing their collaborations. The stolen collection that Ava claimed as hers was traced back by several journalists who recognized similar sketches posted years ago on Lena's old design blog. Screenshots spread online like wildfire. #JusticeForLena began trending. Within days, major fashion critics called for an investigation into Royce Empire's ethics. Suddenly, the empire Ethan had spent his life protecting was on fire. Investors sold their shares. The company's stock plummeted overnight. Major partners, including the prestigious Milan Fashion Group, publicly terminated their contracts. For the first time, Ethan Royce, the man who never lost, watched everything crumble. Inside the boardroom, tension exploded. "You said you verified those designs," one director shouted at Ava. "You swore they were original." Ava's confidence cracked. "They were. I only used them as references," she stammered. But her words fell flat. The board demanded her resignation on the spot. By afternoon, security escorted her out of the building. Ethan stood by the window, watching the skyline blur through the rain. His reflection looked like a stranger, a man with power but no peace, wealth but no trust. Every sound in the office reminded him of Lena, her quiet footsteps, her laughter when she explained the emotion behind a design, the look in her eyes the day she tried to tell him the truth. For the first time, he realized he had destroyed the only person who had ever believed in him without expecting anything in return. The next morning, the headlines changed again. Ava Bennett fired after plagiarism scandal. Royce Empire faces public backlash. But it was too late. The company's reputation was ruined. Ethan's board voted to suspend him as CEO until further notice. He went home to an empty penthouse. The silence was unbearable. Her favorite cup still sat on the counter. Her scarf was still hanging on the chair. Everything reminded him of what he had lost. Not just a designer, not just a wife by contract, but the woman who had shown him what honesty and loyalty looked like. He tried to call her, but the number was disconnected. Weeks turned into months. The city moved on, as cities always do. But Ethan did not. He attended shareholder meetings, tried to rebuild the company, and spent sleepless nights replaying every conversation, every mistake, every cruel word he had said to her. Then, one day, while scrolling through a digital magazine, he saw a headline that stopped his heart. Lena Hayes debuts independent label, Hayes and Heart, with a collection that redefines forgiveness. The photos were stunning. The designs carried her soul, elegant, emotional, and alive. Critics called it a rebirth. Her show sold out in minutes. Her company gained investors from Paris and Los Angeles. Ethan stared at the screen, his throat tight, his vision blurred. She had done what he could not, risen from the ashes with grace. He knew what he had to do. He would find her, not as the CEO she once worked for, not as the man who signed her into a loveless contract, but as someone who had finally learned what love truly meant. Too late to deserve it, but not too late to try. 6 months later, New York was preparing for another fashion season, and the name Lena Hayes was everywhere. Her debut brand, Hayes and Heart, had captured the attention of the fashion world with its raw emotion and sincerity. Her designs spoke to the human soul. Every seam told a story. Every fabric carried meaning. She was no longer the forgotten designer accused of theft. She was now a symbol of integrity and rebirth. The night of her first solo showcase, the air outside the venue buzzed with energy. Photographers filled the red carpet, and guests from every major fashion house took their seats. Inside, the lights dimmed, and soft piano music began to play. Lena stood backstage, her heart racing, her hands cold. She had faced months of rebuilding, not just her career, but her self-worth. And now, the moment had come. As the first model walked out, applause erupted. One by one, her designs came to life. Flowing gowns, intricate patterns, and bold shapes that celebrated strength and forgiveness. The final piece, a white silk gown stitched with silver thread, shimmered under the spotlight. It was her message to the world, that beauty could rise even from brokenness. But among the crowd sat a man she did not expect to see. Ethan Royce. He was no longer the untouchable CEO the world once admired. The press had torn his image apart after Royce Empire's collapse. He looked older now, humbler, his sharp features softened by regret. He sat quietly in the back row, watching her in silence, his hands clasped tightly. When the show ended, the audience rose to their feet. Lena's eyes shimmered with tears as she stepped forward to bow. The applause was deafening, but she could barely hear it. Her gaze found Ethan's, and for a brief second, time froze. Later that night, after the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, she walked alone through the empty hall, holding her sketchbook against her chest. She turned a corner and found him waiting there. He stood by the door, unsure if he should step closer. "You look different," he said quietly. "No, that is not true. You look like yourself again." Lena's voice was calm. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" "I came to see what real courage looks like," he said. His voice trembled slightly, something she had never heard before. "You built something beautiful. I had everything once, power, money, reputation, and I destroyed it all because I could not see the truth when it was right in front of me." She looked away, unsure how to respond. "You do not need to say this. The world has already judged you. You have paid your price." He shook his head. "No. Losing the company was not the real punishment. Losing you was." There was a long pause. The air between them was heavy with everything they had left unsaid. The pain, the betrayal, the longing. "I was angry for a long time," she admitted. "Not because you doubted me, but because I believed in you. I kept thinking that maybe, deep down, you would have fought for me." Ethan stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have. I see that now. I let arrogance blind me, and fear make me cruel. But I have learned something in losing everything. Money rebuilds, reputation fades, but trust once broken does not come back easily." He took a breath. "Still, if there is any part of you that can forgive me, even if it is small, I would spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." Lena looked at him for a long time. The pain in her heart had not vanished, but it had changed. It was no longer sharp. It had softened into something quieter, something like understanding. "You cannot undo what happened," she said gently. "But maybe you can start by being better than the man who hurt me." Ethan nodded. "Then that is what I will do." He turned to leave, but she called after him. "Ethan." He stopped, waiting. "The truth is, I already forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, but for me." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both sadness and peace. That is more mercy than I deserve." As he walked away, Lena felt a strange calm settle over her. The storm that once consumed her heart had finally passed. Outside, the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, a reflection of everything she had endured and everything she had become. For the first time in a long while, she did not look back. She simply breathed, free and whole again. And somewhere deep in that freedom, she knew, sometimes, forgiveness is not the ending of love. It is the quiet beginning of healing. Weeks passed after that night, and Lena's life slowly found rhythm again. Hayes and Hart continued to grow, and her name became a quiet symbol of resilience in an industry that often forgot kindness. The media had moved on to new scandals, new faces, but for Lena, peace was not silence. It was the calm after surviving every storm. Yet somewhere in that calm, there were still shadows of what had been. Ethan's words lingered in her mind, not as a wound, but as a truth she could not ignore. She had forgiven him, yes, but forgiveness did not mean forgetting. One afternoon, she sat by the large window of her new studio in Soho, sketching designs for her upcoming winter line. The walls were painted white, sunlight streamed through the glass, and soft jazz played in the background. It was a far cry from the cold corporate world she had once lived in. But even now, she sometimes found herself glancing at her phone, half expecting a message that never came. Then, one day it did. It was from a private number. The message read, "Congratulations on your Paris debut. Your work deserves the world." Lena stared at it for a long moment. She did not reply, but she smiled just a little. Because for the first time, Ethan's message was not about regret or control. It was simply acknowledgement. 2 weeks later, their paths crossed again, not by plan, but by fate. The Paris Winter Gala was one of the most prestigious fashion events in the world, attended by designers, investors, and international press. Lena had been invited as a featured speaker, while Ethan had been quietly rehired as a consultant for a European investment group rebuilding former luxury houses. The ballroom was filled with crystal chandeliers and golden light. As Lena stepped in, wearing a black silk gown from her own collection, cameras turned to her. She was poised, radiant, and confident. But when she looked across the room, she saw him, standing near the balcony, his eyes finding hers almost immediately. They had not spoken since that night in New York. The crowd around them blurred as their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Later that evening, after her speech and the applause that followed, Lena stepped outside to breathe. The Paris air was cold, scented with winter rain. She stood under the marble archway, watching the city shimmer across the Seine. And then, again his voice, quiet, hesitant, came from behind her. "Paris suits you," Ethan said softly. She turned. He looked different, calmer, lighter, though his eyes still carried the weight of everything he had lost. "And you?" she asked. "Are you still chasing empires?" He shook his head. "Not anymore. I work with independent designers now. Smaller companies. No contracts, no power plays. Just creativity. It is different." Lena smiled faintly. "That sounds like growth." He nodded. "Maybe it is. Or maybe it is me trying to find pieces of myself that success once buried." They stood there for a while, silent, as the city hummed around them. Finally, he said, "I never expected to see you again, but I hoped I would." Lena met his gaze, steady, kind, and unguarded. "I did not expect it either. But life has its way of bringing back unfinished chapters." Ethan's voice lowered. "Do you think some chapters can ever be rewritten?" She looked away toward the river. "Not rewritten, but perhaps continued if the story deserves it." A soft breeze carried the scent of rain between them. For the first time, there was no anger, no bitterness, only quiet understanding. He smiled then, a small, genuine smile she had never seen before. "I will not ask for a second chance. You owe me nothing. But if our paths ever cross again, I would like to believe it will not be as strangers." Lena's eyes softened. "Then maybe you should stop saying if." The clock tower struck midnight, its chime echoing across the city. They stood there in silence, two people who had once broken each other, but somehow learned how to heal. When Ethan finally walked away, she did not feel the ache of goodbye, only gratitude. Some love stories were not meant to be about possession. Some were meant to teach, to break, to rebuild, and to remind the heart what it means to feel alive again. As she returned inside, The crowd applauded another designer taking the stage. Lena smiled to herself, feeling lighter than she had in years. Because sometimes, closure is not an ending. It is simply the heart learning to beat again, stronger, wiser, and free. The following spring arrived quietly, with the kind of peace that only comes after chaos. The fashion world was preparing for the annual New York Designers Summit, and once again, Hazen Hart was one of the most anticipated names on the list. Lena had returned to the city that had once broken her, but this time, she was not the same woman who left it behind. Her studio was now a sanctuary of creativity, filled with sketches, fabrics, and soft lights spilling across the floor. She had a small but loyal team, and her designs had reached international recognition. The industry that had once shunned her now spoke her name with admiration. But Lena never let the success blind her again. She knew fame was fleeting, and what truly mattered was integrity. One morning, while preparing for the summit, her assistant handed her an envelope with no return address. Inside was a simple letter written on thick ivory paper. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Lena, I do not know if this letter will find you before or after the summit, but I wanted to say thank you. Watching you rebuild what others tried to destroy has been a lesson in grace I did not know I needed. Roy's empire has officially been dissolved. What remains of it will be used to fund scholarships for young designers, under your name. You deserve that legacy, not me. If our story began with contracts, I hope it ends with freedom, yours and mine. Ethan. Lena's fingers lingered on the letter for a long time. Her heart tightened, not from pain, but from the quiet ache of understanding. Ethan was still out there, changing in his own way, trying to make peace with a world he had once ruled through pride. And somehow, even without seeing him, she could feel that he meant every word. The summit came quickly. Reporters lined the hallways, the buzz of conversation filling the grand ballroom. When Lena took the stage to present her newest collection, the audience fell silent. Her theme was reclamation, a tribute to lost dreams that found new life. Every gown, every suit told a story of second chances. When the final model walked, the crowd erupted into applause. Lena bowed, her eyes shining, her heart full. But as she stepped off stage, she froze. Standing near the exit, almost hidden from the crowd, was Ethan. He was not there for publicity. He did not approach her, did not make a scene. He just stood quietly, his expression filled with pride and remorse. Their eyes met, and that was enough. After the event, as the crowd dispersed, she found him waiting outside under the soft evening rain. You came, she said softly. I did not plan to, he replied. But I could not stay away. I needed to see what redemption looks like. Lena smiled gently. It does not look like much. Just a lot of work and a little faith. He laughed quietly, his voice low and sincere. You make it sound simple. It is not, she said. But it is possible. They walked together down the quiet street, the city lights reflecting on wet pavement. For the first time, their steps matched, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as two people who had survived the same storm. Ethan glanced at her. Do you ever think about what could have been, if things had gone differently? Lena took a breath before answering. Sometimes. But if they had, maybe neither of us would have learned what love truly costs. He nodded slowly, accepting her words. Then maybe this was the only way. A long silence followed, filled not with regret, but with peace. They reached the corner where their paths would separate once again. He turned to her, his eyes softer than she remembered. Thank you, he said, for forgiving me when I did not deserve it, for surviving when I almost destroyed you, and for reminding me that love is not ownership, it is grace. Lena looked at him for a moment, the rain falling gently around them. You do not need to thank me, Ethan. We both paid the price for what happened. But maybe that was the price of redemption. He gave a small nod, a smile that carried finality and freedom all at once. Goodbye, Lena. Goodbye, she whispered. He turned and walked away, his figure fading into the city lights. She stood there for a moment, watching him disappear, then smiled faintly to herself. Some stories are not meant to end in reunion. Some are meant to end in understanding. As she looked up at the glowing skyline of New York, Lena realized she was no longer haunted by the past. The city had changed, and so had she. Because healing does not always mean going back. Sometimes, it means finally being able to walk forward, without fear, without anger, and without looking behind. 2 months after that rainy evening in New York, Lena found herself once again in motion, traveling from one city to another, her life filled with lights, fabrics, and deadlines. Success had brought both beauty and exhaustion. Yet beneath it all, there was still a quiet awareness that no achievement could erase the history she shared with Ethan Royce. Her days were long but full. Her brand, Hayes & Hart, was preparing for a global expansion, the first American designer label in years to open in Milan and Los Angeles simultaneously. Reporters called her the woman who redefined redemption. She smiled during interviews, thanked her team, and spoke with calm confidence. But when the cameras turned off, she often sat in silence, staring out the window of her penthouse studio, wondering how Ethan was doing, and if he was still trying to rebuild his own world too. One morning, her assistant brought in the latest issue of Business Vogue. The headline across the front page read, "Ethan Royce returns. New venture, new purpose." Lena froze. She opened the magazine carefully. The article spoke of Ethan's new foundation, the Royce Trust for Young Creators, a global initiative that funded scholarships, mental health programs, and creative incubators for underprivileged artists. It had already changed hundreds of lives in only 6 months. Her chest tightened as she read his quote. The cost of redemption is not apology, it is action. And sometimes, the best way to rebuild is not to return to power, but to serve. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt tears sting her eyes. He had not just said the right words. He had become the man she always believed he could be. A few days later, she received a formal letter sealed with the Royce Trust emblem. Inside was an invitation. The foundation was hosting a charity gala in collaboration with Hayes & Hart. The event was to fund art programs for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. The letter ended simply. "If you attend, I promise there will be no questions, only gratitude. Ethan." Lena hesitated for days before deciding to go. The night of the gala, the city was wrapped in gold. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and polished marble, filled with the soft hum of music and laughter. Lena wore a simple ivory gown, elegant, understated, yet radiant. When she walked in, the crowd turned. Cameras flashed, but she barely noticed. Her eyes searched across the room, and then she saw him. Ethan stood near the stage, greeting guests, smiling politely. He looked healthier, calmer, transformed by humility rather than success. When their eyes met, he stopped mid-sentence. Time seemed to still. Later in the evening, after the speeches and donations, Ethan took the stage. His voice was firm, sincere, and steady. "Tonight is not about the past," he said. "It is about what we do after the fall. It is about choosing to build something that outlives our mistakes." The audience applauded. When he stepped down, he walked toward her. No spotlight followed him, no cameras turned. It was just the two of them in a room full of people. "I was not sure you would come," he said softly. "I was not sure either," she replied. "But I wanted to see what you have built." He smiled faintly. "It is not much compared to what I destroyed." "It is more than enough," she said. They walked together toward the balcony overlooking the city. Below them, the skyline glittered like 1,000 memories. "I still think about the woman who stood in my office years ago," Ethan said quietly. "The one who believed in love even when life gave her every reason not to. I lost her once because I did not deserve her." Lena looked at him, her voice soft but steady. "Maybe you did not lose her, Ethan. Maybe she just became someone new. Someone you helped shape, even through the pain." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Then maybe that is enough. To know that something good came from all of it." They stood there in silence, the sound of the city filling the air. It was not a moment of confession, nor a plea for reconciliation. It was simply two souls meeting again, whole at last, after being broken apart by pride and time. When the music inside changed to a soft jazz tune, Lena smiled faintly. "You should get back to your guests, Mr. Royce." He chuckled. "And you, Ms. Hayes, should stop disappearing before the last song." For the first time, they both laughed. A genuine, unguarded laugh that felt like sunlight after years of rain. As the night drew to a close, they did not make promises or exchange apologies. They did not need to. The story between them had already found its quiet ending, not in the return of love, but in the grace of forgiveness and the beauty of becoming better people than they once were. And when Lena left that night, she carried no regret, only peace. and the soft truth that sometimes love's truest form is letting go with gratitude. The morning. After the gala, sunlight spilled through Lena's apartment, painting the walls in soft gold. She stood by the window, watching the city slowly wake beneath her, the same skyline that once witnessed her heartbreak, her fall, and her return. New York looked different now. Or maybe it was her who had changed. The world finally seemed at peace again. Hayes and Hart had completed its partnership with the Royce Foundation, and together they raised millions for young artists. It was the kind of success that came not from ambition, but from compassion, the very thing she once lost and fought to find again. As she poured her morning coffee, her phone buzzed. A short message appeared. "Thank you for last night. For coming, for believing that people can change. Take care, Lena. E." She read it twice, smiled softly, and put the phone down. There was no ache anymore, no lingering wound. Only gratitude. Months passed, and life carried her forward. The fashion season came and went. New designers rose, new trends faded. Yet Hayes and Hart continued to thrive because it had something others did not, a soul. Her story had become an unspoken legend in the industry, whispered between young designers who dreamed of doing things differently. One afternoon, while preparing for her next line, her assistant handed her a charity brochure. On the back page was a photo. Ethan, surrounded by children holding sketchbooks, their smiles wide, their eyes full of wonder. He was kneeling beside them, helping a little girl adjust her drawing. He looked happy, not the powerful millionaire he once was, but something far better. Human. Lena traced her finger along the picture, her heart warm. She whispered quietly, "You did it, Ethan." Later that evening, she walked to the same park she used to visit when her life had fallen apart. The trees were green again, the air fresh with spring. She sat on a bench, looking at the city lights reflecting off the water. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely whole. She thought about how strange love could be, how it could wound, heal, destroy, and rebuild. It was never perfect, never predictable. But maybe that was the point. Love was not about who stays or who leaves. It was about what remains after everything else falls away: compassion, forgiveness, and the courage to keep living with an open heart. As the sun dipped below the skyline, a little boy ran past, holding a paper airplane. It soared into the air, catching the last streak of light before disappearing into the horizon. Lena watched it go and smiled. She whispered, almost to herself, "We all find our way home, one way or another." Then she stood, brushed off her coat, and walked down the path toward the glowing city ahead, steady, graceful, free. Because in the end, life had not given her the ending she once imagined. It had given her something far more lasting: peace, purpose, and the kind of love that does not need to be held to be real. The story that began with a contract had ended not with vows, but with forgiveness. And that, she realized, was its greatest miracle. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are not born from wealth. They are born from the courage to forgive and the grace to begin again.